tonight that will help you with different areas of your financial plan. So at Debra Jones, I'm, like I said, like the quarterback, and we have a team of advisors that help me to help you, okay? So tonight, I'm going to introduce a couple people that will help us with the information for tonight. We're going to be talking about estate planning and using life insurance as an asset, okay? So the first person that I'd like to talk with you is Debra Jessup. She's with Jessup and Probst, okay? And she's an estate planning attorney. I met Debra many moons ago when I was a banker at Wachovia. And she and her husband came to see me for help there. And she was a law professor at Wake Forest University, okay? And she taught law for many years, and now she is a partner with Jessup and Probst downtown, okay? So she's going to talk with you tonight. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have. And while you're participating, if I hear some really good questions, I'm going to give away some prizes, okay? Who's my golfer? Larry, are you the golfer? Okay, I'm going to keep my eye on you. But I've got prizes, so we love participation. And let's help Debra feel welcome.
Well, good evening. Good evening. It's so nice to be here to be able to talk to you about estate planning. I think that it's wonderful that you're here because oftentimes when I tell people that I do estate planning, you know, everybody kind of drops their head. Nobody wants to, you know, it's not something that people like to talk about, but it is something that everybody does need to talk about and think about because everybody has an estate plan and everybody needs one. And when I tell people that they already have one, they're usually a little bit surprised. And I've got some information that I want you all to look at. It's in the navy blue folder. And it's just a couple of little slides that I've printed off so that we can, you know, have something to kind of follow along as I'm going through it. Really more to keep me on track so I don't get too far afield. And so, and if at any time you have a question or if I say something you don't understand, please feel free to stop me because we really do want to keep this informal and I don't want you to have any questions or concerns about anything, so I'm happy to stop, so just interrupt me. But I was saying that, you know, everybody needs an estate plan, and because of that, the state of North Carolina has already provided one for you. If you don't choose one for yourself, they have chosen one for you. It's something called estate administration, and all of your assets pass by something called intestate succession. So they get to decide who gets your assets, and that may not be the way that you would prefer. So you have to be proactive and actually think about, you know, what you would like done with your assets, you know, after you've passed away. And one of the things that I get from people all the time, well, I don't need an estate plan, but everybody does. If we start with someone who is young, like say somebody who's 18 or 19 years old, if you've had a child go to college, they've told you that they cannot discuss your child with you because they're an adult. So if they needed to have someone make a decision for them, if they were sick or incapacitated, most people don't realize that you'd actually have to have them declared incompetent, and you would actually have to go to or you actually have a hearing. Welcome on in. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Debra Jessup. I'm doing estate planning. Welcome.
While we're taking a pause, the gentleman is coming around to take your order. That's the one thing I forgot. But when you get your food, please feel free to eat. And
Yes.
this is totally informal. Okay? We can take orders and get you started on your meal.
So as I was saying, even someone as young as 18, there are documents that they might need to sign. They might need to have a health care power of attorney. They might, you know, there are things that you need to think about and be proactive about once you're married and have children. That's another phase of your life where you need to do estate planning. Once you retire, you have grandchildren. Now we're in another phase of your life where you might want to think about what you want to do with your assets. So when you're thinking about estate planning, you're thinking about all of your assets, how it's going to be passed, what you want done with it. And you know, I like to tell people that, you know, you can provide for your loved ones, and I almost don't want to say anything, but you know, we can almost do anything you want to do with your assets. I mean, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. but it requires you to take some time and think about it. We can be creative. We can provide for the next generation. If we take some time now and think about what you want to do, you know, almost anything. We can almost do anything. I always say, because as soon as I say anything, somebody will come up with something that we can't do. But you can almost do anything, and even though, you know, the underlying reason for doing estate planning, you know, is something that people don't want to talk about. You know, if we sit down and we talk about it, we can do some good things. You know, we can do some things that make you feel good about taking care of your family. We can do some things that will give you peace of mind about your family. And that ultimately is a good thing. Okay. So if you turn to my little, the handout, you'll see that part of the very first part of it, Sharma's kind of already introduced looking at a team, and I wanted to say thank you to her before I forget for letting me be part of her team, because I'm really excited to be here to talk to you all. If you turn to the third page, they talk about the 5 primary financial needs: preparing for retirement, living in retirement, paying for education, planning for the unexpected, and planning for your estate and inheritance. We can help you do all of those things. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about the different instruments that we can use. Just a quick overview of the kinds of documents, we call them instruments, that we use in estate planning. The first one is well, let me ask you, since Sharma wants participation, what's the first one that everybody knows about? It's the easiest document that everybody knows about for estate planning. The will. Okay.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Absolutely. That is the estate document that everybody knows the most about. It's the most common one, the will. And all the will is just a document that transfers your assets after you pass away. You can be creative with your will. You can be as specific as you like or as general as you like. If I tell people, if you've got that special heirlooms that you promised to your granddaughter, you can be very specific in your will. You can say, I leave my mother's wedding ring to my granddaughter, Sophia. You can be very, very specific in your will. And even though a will is something that we do quite often, and it's something that most people can do, and can accommodate your wishes, there are some downsides to doing a will. First of all, it has to go through probate. Probate is kind of a long and drawn-out process. Probate can be expensive. It does tie your assets up. That's not to say it's not something that people do, but it's not the only thing that you can do. But it's one of those components. Let's see who knows this. There's another document or instrument that we can use. A trust. Who said it first? Right here. Right here. A trust. You can also, instead of a will, or maybe even in conjunction with a will, depending upon what you want to do, and as I said, we can be creative. You can do something their trust can be revocable or irrevocable. The most common trust is a revocable living trust. And so what is that? A revocable living trust is an instrument that allows you to title your assets in the name of the trust. So mine would be the Debra Jessup Living Trust. And so rather than my assets being titled in my name, they'd be titled in the name of the trust. Now, essentially, you can do the same thing with a trust. You can decide who's the beneficiary going to be. You can decide what happens with that trust after you pass away. You can create a children's trust within that trust. If you have minor children, or if you want to create something for your grandchildren, it is a wonderful vehicle for being creative. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The advantages, let me tell you some of the advantages of a trust. The advantages of a trust are creditors can't reach the assets. You can be the trustee. A revocable living trust, you can change it at any time during your life. You can cancel it because you're in charge of it. Essentially, you have the same control over it, but when you pass away, your assets will then be dispersed in the same way as they would a will, except for you don't have to go through probate. Trusts are private, so nobody in the community knows what you've done with your assets. As opposed to a will, which probate is public. Everything that's done with probate is public record. Anybody can walk in the courthouse and just pull your name up and look at your file and see what your assets were, what debts you have. And some people don't care. I think that really the real reason I am not a big fan of probate, just because of the expense, and it does take a long time. And there's a way to avoid that if we feel like you need to.
Yeah, but that expense is this. I'm sorry. Still 5% of the total estate. Okay.
Yeah, the attorney's fees it's somewhere between 3 and 5%. The clerk of court does have to approve the attorney's fee, but it's you get paid a percentage of everything that comes into the estate and goes out, and so that's anywhere from 3 to 5% of the total amount of your estate. So you save money immediately by bypassing probate and placing your assets in a trust. And it's money that you actually can go ahead and pay and have it done now, as opposed to, at some point after you pass away.
If you named an executor, does that still apply?
Well, the executor is going to be in charge of your will. With the trust, you appoint a trustee. And when you create your revocable living trust, you can be the trustee yourself while you're alive, and then you just appoint what we call a successor trustee. And another benefit of having your assets in a trust is if something happens and you are incapacitated for some reason, now your successor trustee, which could be your spouse, actually has the authority to manage your assets, as opposed to a will only takes effect after you've passed away. So if you become incapacitated and you only have a will, if you don't have some of the other documents that I was getting ready to talk about, a durable power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney, then, because I actually just had this situation where I had a young woman call me. Her father was very ill. He was actually in a coma, and he'd been in the hospital for about 30 days, and she was in a situation where she needed to access his accounts so that she could pay his bills. And so she called me up and she says, well, I need a power of attorney so that I can take care of my father's affairs. So does anybody here know what my answer was to her? Why not?
Because he wasn't in.
He wasn't. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Because he's the only person who can give her the authority. And he has to be competent. And so yes ma'am.
If her name had been on all of his bank accounts and all that,
Absolutely.
there's no problem. If you have I have 2 daughters. If I have their name on everything that I have their name on it already.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be not a problem for them to liquidate anything they wanted to get, right?
Well, I hate to say it depends, because I think people hate when lawyers say it depends. And I try real hard not to say it depends,
Right.
but it really does depend. Now, like for example, with your accounts, your checking and savings
Right.
account, if she's on there and she is a joint signer on the
Right.
account, then she has the authority to write checks on that account.
Like, can she use all of it, or can she only use half of it?
All of it.
She can use all of it.
And then there are other things that you can do with the accounts that kind of bypass probate as well. You can use something called payable on death. If you have an account, they can set that up at the bank. But this poor woman did not have, her name was not on anything. And the answer to my question is that the only thing that I can do for her is we would actually have to have a hearing to have him declared incompetent and have her appointed his guardian, which is a much more expensive and a much more time-consuming process, as opposed to him just signing, that power of attorney and the healthcare power of attorney then all she needs is that little piece of paper. Yes, ma'am.
How long will the assets be living?
You know,
It
it depends. It really, I can tell you, give you a ballpark. Like for example, you have to qualify. Someone will have to qualify as either the executor if there's a will, or the administrator if there is not. And that can be done pretty quickly because the clerk's office, especially in Forsyth County, the larger counties, they can usually get you in pretty quickly. But you do have to do a 90-day inventory of all of the assets, and then you actually have to do a notice of creditors in the newspaper, and that has to be published in the newspaper once a week for 4 weeks. So now we're at least 4 weeks out, and then you've got to, they get so much time to then file their notice, and then we've got to pull all the assets into an estate account. There is a hierarchy of how the debts actually have to be paid, fuel expenses, and you kind of got to go all the way down that list. And then after you've done all of that, you come to the end. Then you do your final accounting, which the clerk has to approve. And that's a process, depending upon the size of the estate, that can take 3 months. It can take a year. I've known estates to stay open for years.
I've got one right now that we've been dealing with since 2012. The woman passed away. She had intentions of setting up a will and a trust, but they couldn't find any of her documents. She passed away unexpectedly. And so her children, she has 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and they searched all of her files. They couldn't find a will. They couldn't find power. They couldn't do anything because they just didn't have any legal documentation. They had to do what Debra was saying, go to the clerk of court, get administration paperwork done, and actually one of the daughters was appointed. One thing with that, though, she has a son that couldn't manage money. So she wanted his money, if he was to inherit anything, to go into something where he would get it in stages. That didn't happen because she passed away before she should get that done. So that estate is still open as of today. It's about 2 years in. And it takes a while. So we've got to get our paperwork in order, get our wishes met, because it's not going to be like we intended if we don't write that down and make it all legal.
Right. And I'm going to come back to that in just a few minutes, but a couple of other documents that we use when we're doing estate planning. One of them is called a living will, and I'm sure that everybody's heard of advanced directive living will, and there are reasons to do them, reasons not to do them, but there's no reason not to discuss them. And that's what I tell people. Oftentimes people choose to do them, they choose not to. But I always want to bring it up. I always want to talk to people, and I always like to tell people why I think you should do them. Everybody knows when you go to the hospital now, they have you sign the advanced directives, and that's fine. But I think that I like to think of it almost like a gift to the people that you love, because what I suggest that people do is you sign it. I'm going to give you a bunch of copies. You can take it to your doctor, you can give it to your family members, and you can say, I've made this decision, now you don't have to. As opposed to, something
How long
happens.
will it last?
A living will?
And
that's until you revoke it. Until you revoke it. And I always tell people, have a conversation, because, the one thing we know about doctors is they put everything in writing. They're going to dictate it. So I always tell them, go in, make an appointment, have a conversation. The next time you go, put it in his hand and say, I want you to put in my records that I gave you this, and these are my wishes. And now you don't have a doctor asking your children or your spouse, what do you want to do? And so I like to think of it as sort of a gift to the people that you love, that I took that decision away from them. I made it. They didn't have to make it. And it's okay, Mom made that, Debra made that. We don't have to do it. Okay. And the last thing that I always do, and depends on where you are and how old your children are, but I'll also include guardianship documents, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I do want to get through some of the script. And so, and feel free to go ahead and eat. As you can tell, I'm sort of a talker bee, and so I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going and going. I'm just like that energetic button. I'll just keep going and going and going. But the first one that I want to talk to you about, it says it's Act 1, and we don't have an estate plan. We don't need an estate plan. And here what we have is we have a woman who whose husband has passed away, and she has children, Cynthia, Tom, Patty, Veronica, and Debra. I like that name, Debra. And so she's in a situation, her house is paid off, she's just starting her retirement. And so the question is, can Claire help her grandchildren with higher education costs? Can she pass her assets on to her children? What do you think? Yeah, she can. And so it's just really isn't just a matter of how. I mean, even if Claire didn't do anything, if she didn't have a will, her assets would pass on to her children. She could not do. She would just get to use that estate plan that the state of North Carolina has in place. Okay. But what if she did want to do? What if all her children are grown and she wants to do something for her grandchildren? You know, then she could create a trust. She could create a trust, and it could be for the Claire's grandchildren's trust. And she might decide that and she may not even have any grandchildren, because you see in our scenario, she doesn't have any grandchildren. So she can create this trust for the benefit of her children or her grandchildren, or if she's got one, and then every grandchild that's born after that, you know, they set up little sub-trusts. So we'll have the Sophia Trust, the Billy Trust, you know, the Mary Trust. And she can fund that with her assets, with her life insurance. And now, and she can decide, okay, I want this money to stay in trust and be managed and invested until, you know, each one of my grandchildren, you know, turns 18. And then they get to embark upon whatever the choice is for their life. You know, maybe they want to travel, maybe they want to go to college, maybe they want to, whatever it is that they want to do. Now on their 18th birthday, they've got a gift from their grandmother. And she can make those directions to her trustee, or she can leave it all to her children. Now, what if she's got a child? What if one of her children is one of those people that she thinks is not going to be able to manage his money? So Tom is going to blow through all his money. So she's going to say, well, I'm going to leave all of this, you know, each one is going to get an individual share, but I'm going to create the Tom Trust because Tom is a spendthrift. And I'm going to make my brother the trustee, because my brother will tell him no. Now, why did I choose my brother? But you can choose anybody. There's a reason why I would choose my brother. You know why I would choose my brother? Because I wouldn't want my children to fall out between each other.
Yeah.
But see, those are the kinds of things we get to talk about when we're being proactive, when we're thinking about who our children are. And I always say, you know, we know our children. We know exactly who they are, and we know who they are not. You know, we might not say it out loud, but we know our children. And so, and I'm not going to tell them what you said, but we can sit down in my office and we can close the door, you know, and we can make all of the decisions that we need to make, you know, for our children. And you can walk out and have peace of mind that you've provided for each one of your children, who are all unique and special. And you know exactly who they are, and you can have peace of mind. Okay, so if you turn to the next scenario, Act 2 says it won't happen to us. Okay? We've got parents, Roberta and Maria. We've got 2 children, Olivia and William, and they're married 18 years. They have a tragic auto accident, and the children are left without parents. And now I have another question for you. Does anybody know what happens to those children? You go out on date night, you left your children at home with a babysitter. What happens to your children? What happens immediately that day, that night?
They take them in.
Yeah, they're going to take them into Child Protective Services. And what I always tell people, you know, if legally, the police have to take the children into Child Protective Services. And they are placed in foster care until a guardian can be appointed. They do a great job in trying to get the children, you know, to a family member as quickly as they can. But you know, it's a process, and they've got to get to a judge. You know, and they do a wonderful job of placing children with family members who step forward. But, once again, that's something that they don't have to go through. We do something, or I suggest that you do something as appointing a short-term guardian and a long-term guardian, maybe, if they're two different people. And if you're leaving your children with a babysitter, you make sure that they've got that short-term guardian designation. All the important papers are right here. This is the person that you call. You call my sister Vicky because she's the guardian. If something happens to me, you call this person. So she knows that she's the short-term guardian. And so if something happens, the police show up, you know to call Vicky. Yes?
Short-term guardian and a long-term guardian in the same document?
No. It's two different documents. Now, it could be one if they're the same person.
So really, that's my in-laws or my kids' guardians, they live in Florida. And I don't think we have a short-term guardian that's here in North Carolina, even though my parents live in Greensboro.
And that's the reason when we're talking is that, I'm asking them, who's going to take your children immediately? Who would you want to have your children? And they said, well, my sister. I said, well, where does she live? Well, she lives in Utah. Okay, well, you live here in North Carolina, so if something happens to you, your children are going to foster care. Unless, we've got somebody, and you don't have to go through all of this with the babysitter. All you have to do is say, if something happens to me, call Vicky. Okay, and we will have already made sure that Vicky's got the guardianship papers and that she can walk. When she's going to come over, she's going to show the police, I'm the short-term guardian. Their grandparents in Florida are the long-term guardian. I'm supposed to keep them until their grandparents get here. And, like I said a little while ago about, we know our children. I'm sure you all don't, but, probably in my family, there are probably a few people that I wouldn't want to raise my children, and we don't have to say that out loud anywhere else except for maybe in my office. And, we will actually put that. I actually will put that in with the documents, that it would not be my preference to have, these people. And we get to list, we always ask you to have alternative guardians. I try to ask questions that maybe you haven't thought about, if your sister is no longer married to Joe, would you still want your children to be raised just by your sister, or would you rather, Sister Vicky, or would you rather they go to your sister Marilyn and her husband Bob? What kinds of things do you want them to know about how you want your children raised? Do you think the arts are important? Do you think that travel is important? We'll talk. I try to get people to think about all the things that they would have wanted done for their children, and we think we can do all of that with the trust and between the guardianship papers. So those are the general documents. We got a will, we have trust, we have healthcare power of attorney, general power of attorney, we've got living wills, and if necessary, we have a guardianship document. So those are all the documents that we need. And with, I'm sorry. Well, it's called a durable power of attorney. And what that does is that allows them to handle your financial affairs and anything that needed to be done. Like if you didn't have their name on your checking account, healthcare power of attorney allows them to make your health decisions if you are not. The durable general power of attorney, like would allow them to file your income taxes and sign, do basically conduct all of your affairs. Because they could walk in with that little piece of paper and say, she's incapacitated, but I have this durable power. And durable power of attorney would then, it remains valid after you become incapacitated.
What defines an incapacitated?
You are incapacitated if you are not able to make your own decisions. It's gray and broad for a reason, but usually people don't usually step in and use them unless it's absolutely clear. And I think that if there's any question about whether or not you're incapacitated, then you would be there to protest. And then if it becomes a question as to whether or not you are actually competent, then I would say I would advise a bank, if they asked me, if you called them up and said, my son's got my power of attorney, but I'm not incompetent. then, and he was trying to do something like that, I would advise them that that would be something that they would then need to seek legal advice on. You know, so usually when they're used, it's not usually a question. It's usually when people are, you know,
In a coma
in
state,
a
maybe.
coma. There's a
Or confined to a nursing home.
that doesn't necessarily mean that you're incapacitated. Now, there is a situation I know of right now where a lady just had a pretty severe stroke, and she is at this point incapacitated. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you will always remain in an incapacitated state. You know,
Question, are there any cognitive tests that the doctor will perform to determine if the person is incompetent?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. The doctors actually do that. We see it done most of the time when we are actually filing to have someone declared incompetent and have someone appointed the guardian. The doctor would actually then have to come in. You have to give a statement from the doctor saying that this person, he's gone through this list of tests, and this person has, that in his medical opinion, this person is no longer competent for that.
I was just gonna add, because I have a passion for helping people create generational wealth as it relates to children, most of the folks in this room probably have grown children, but grandchildren, maybe gifting to them or putting them into the trust. You may be getting to that, Deborah, but I wanted to kind of dig a little bit deeper in how to set up a trust to kind of give to grandchildren or create that stream.
And that is actually a great point, because I usually get a little chuckle when I mention that to people. I say, you know, you can bypass your children and go straight to your grandchildren. Yeah, they usually think that, you know, and a lot of times I get that, oh, really? Yeah, you know. So people are usually pretty excited to realize that. But yes, you can. I mean, you can take your wealth, your assets, if your children are fine. You can create a trust, an individual trust for each one of your grandchildren if you want to, or a general trust. There are lots of different ways to do it, but you can take your wealth and pass it on to your grandchildren and give them the benefit of the income from the trust, and you can put property, income generating property in the trust. You can be funded with cash, and then you can make these grandchildren the benefit by allowing them to get the income. And you set up your trustee and your wishes as to how you like the income dispersed to them, and it can be, you know, monthly, yearly, until they reach 25, 35. It can really be whatever you want, but that is a great way to use a trust. And oftentimes what people will do is they'll create those trusts and they will fund them with a life insurance policy. Yes, ma'am.
If you have a residence and you would like to put in your daughter's name, you and your daughter, his owner, one advisor said for me not to do that because she's married, and if they divorce, he can take it. So I shouldn't do that.
Well, if you put it in her name now, you know, he is her heir. So if something happens to her and you not retain the life estate, so if something happens to her, he is her heir and he can inherit your house.
Can you speak a little bit too about, I know this from a little bit of personal experience, but the litigation on her daughter directed towards her, that would be an issue as well, right?
Yes, I was next getting, exactly, that's a good point, is that if the house is in your daughter's name, now her creditors can, because she owns it, it's an asset that she actually owns. You know, a better solution would be to put the house in a trust. You could retain, you could be the trustee, you could put it in a living trust and make her the beneficiary of the trust. It's probably not, I would have to say not actually agree. But there are other ways to do what you are trying to do. There are other ways to do it. And you know, you put this in a trust. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he has a daughter who's in college, who were talking about, you know, putting their assets, and it's only about putting their assets in a trust. And I said, well, you know that it never becomes a marital asset. And he was like, so you mean if my daughter married that knucklehead? Yeah, she marries that knucklehead that you don't like. You know, now all of her property is in this trust, and the assets of the trust do not become a marital asset, meaning they would not be subject to division for purposes of divorce. Now, any income she takes out of the trust and puts into the marriage, of course, is a marital asset. So she takes, if the trust paid her $1,000 a month and she bought furniture or whatever she wanted to do with it, now that would be, she puts it into the marriage, that becomes a marital asset. And another thing too, you know, that inherited property is not a marital asset in the state of North Carolina. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind too, so that, you know, if your children inherit something from you, it's not a marital asset until they make it a marital asset. They can retitle it, or, you know, or start pouring marital assets into it. So it's almost like when people inherit things, I always think, well, don't you want to maybe take what you've inherited from your parents and maybe put it in a trust, and so it's not a marital asset? Or maybe take what your, one of the things that I personally, I have some property that my brothers and I inherited from my parents. We're going to take that and put it into a trust for their grandchildren, so that they have the benefit of something that their grandparents earned, because we just think that would be a nice way to protect it. And we put it in a trust. They get the benefit of it. The trust owns it, and so it never becomes subject to their creditors. And so it'll be something that they can always have. And I'm gonna end my turn. And the last one is that we've got parents. They've got 2 children, and they call it the near miss. And so now they're starting to think about, so something's happened, and they're thinking, oh, well, what if something happens to me? Are my affairs in order? And I love these questions. Who are the beneficiaries? Who is the executor of the trustee? And I really see this as sort of summing up everything that I've said, is that, you know, everybody has an estate, and that last couple, those questions are questions that you should ask yourself every couple of years. You know, how has my life changed? You know, do I have a new job? Do we have more children? Do I have one child in college now, one in middle school? You know, every couple of years, your estate plan is something that you need to review, because you do, and you need to reassess where you are, where you want to be. Do you have enough life insurance? Maybe your children are all now adults, and the plan that you would have put in place when they were younger would be something very much different now that they're older. So estate planning is something else. Like it's really for life. It's something that, you know, we have to talk about and be proactive about and plan. And I assure you that once you've done it and you've gotten everything all together, you will have a peace of mind about the care and protection of your family. So I'm going to sit down.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great job. And I love the information Debra gave. On one of the slides in here, it talked about when it comes to your estate, even if you've taken no action at all, I believe Debra said this, everyone in this room has an estate plan. Is it the state's plan, North Carolina estate plan for you, or have you actually told someone your wishes and made it legal in a document that we can go by if something ever happens to you? So this is great information. Thank you, guys. I'm going to bring up John Stovall next. He's going to talk about life insurance, which can be used as an asset, which can also help to fund trusts and fund your estate plan at some point. And he's going to talk about this generational wealth that we're talking about. So with that, let me introduce John Stovall with Lincoln Financial. He's the father of 2 boys, right?
1 boy, 1 girl.
One girl, sorry. He lives in Greensboro, so he's a local gentleman. We partnered together to talk about life insurance that Lincoln Financial offers. And so he's one of about 7 partners I have, but he's a great person to get to know, and he can share some really good information about this stuff. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, like Sharon was saying, that one of those examples in there was really close to me. A father of 2, I like to kind of call it the American dream, you know, mortgage payment, 2 daycare payments, 2 car payments. And I have all the reason in the world to do the planning that Debra's talking about.
American dream.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the things that I always say actually is it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose tonight. You're going to get a ton of information, not only from Debra, probably from what I say as well. And the goal here is to grasp on the one thing that you feel like is most important to you and start there, and then work your way through it. A lot of people that go to one of these seminars, they also think about somebody else that's in their family that they want to help them address that need. And that's where I think about myself, because it might be your children that are the ones you want to make sure they understand this process as much as you do. So take that with you. The 3 things that I really want to touch on tonight really are types of insurance. What I do with Charmin is usually you're going to have these conversations with Charmin about what your goals are, what your concerns are, what your needs are, and where I become part of the team is I bring in the solutions to hopefully help you reach those goals or to, you know, keep your concerns at bay. So that's kind of my part on the team. So I want to talk about types of insurance. I'm going to touch on review, which Debra already did, and how important that is in life insurance, and I'll give you a few examples. And then the last piece is going to be a little example of this multi-generational wealth she was talking about, because I think it's important to understand how creative we can be. I mean, really, that's what it is. There's a lot of creativity, and people I don't think understand exactly what you can do. So the way I kind of look at insurance is a little bit on a continuum. So hopefully everybody can see this. And I'm going to draw this out for you real quick. And those are ages, 30 years old, 60 years old, 90 years old, okay? All right. I'll write as big as I can. And I'm going to explain what these little acronyms are very quickly as we go through, okay? And really the first point I want to make is there's a need for insurance at almost any age. Yeah. Everybody get it? There's a need for insurance at almost any age. And I'll start with term because that's the most basic of insurances that are out there. I'm in the insurance business. I've been working for Lincoln for 7 years. That's the insurance I have. So this is something that I think younger people obviously are going to be drawn to, but it actually can be for people of almost any age. Everybody familiar with term? Heard of term insurance? So really, term insurance at its core it's a short-term solution for a short-term need. Most people use it to help cover debt. Maybe they use it as a way to replace income if something were to happen in your younger years when you're still generating retirement. Not necessarily when you're living in retirement. I go back to my scenario of 34 years old. I work, my wife works as well, but if something were to happen to me, she's going to be having a hard time to keep the lifestyle that we're accustomed to. A lot of people do have term insurance through their work. That's usually one of the first conversations I have. But to me, the most important part when you're thinking about term insurance is 2 things. One, if it's through work, is it portable? Okay? And what that means is, I'm going to have to do this. My handwriting is not that great anyway. What that means is if you left your job or you lose your job, does your insurance go with you? And the reason that's important is because that's probably when you need it the most. So that's something I think a lot of young people don't necessarily think about is I have everything through work, I'm good. I hear that all the time when I'm doing client meetings. I'm good. I've got it through work. And usually my follow-up question to that is, well, how much do you have through work? And they usually can't answer that question. And then I ask, well, what type of insurance is it? And they usually can't answer that question. So it's hard to be good if you can't answer those questions. The second thing that I ask is it convertible? Is anybody familiar with the term convertible? So convertibility means that you can actually move from your term insurance policy into a permanent insurance policy, something that would last for the rest of your life without going back through underwriting. All right, and the reason that's important is your health's going to change over time. So the reason I own term insurance is because I got to go through underwriting as a 30-year-old and get a very good underwriting class. And now for the next 15 years, starting at 30, if something were to happen to me where I became uninsurable or less insurable, I can actually use that conversion privilege to get into a permanent insurance policy that could last me for the rest of my life without having to go back and requalify. And that to me is actually the most important reason to have a term insurance policy, is not for the death benefit. Term insurance, again, short-term need. It's a short-term need, so I don't want to see those checks go out to clients that I work with. What I want to see is them get to the end of that term policy and then decide, do I need to get more insurance, or should I potentially use that conversion privilege as a way to go from the term policy into something more permanent, so my needs will change. Does that make sense for everybody? All right, perfect. Take a break while it passes. And to give you a little bit of an idea about this conversion feature on most insurances, most term insurance, ours at Lincoln is good enough until you're 70 years old. So if you have a 30-year term policy that you bought at 41, you now have up until your 70th birthday, or the end of that term period, which is 30 years, to decide whether you want to have permanent insurance, or whether you maybe are less insurable now and you can use it as a way to be able to get permanent insurance. So that's how powerful that piece can be. Looks delicious. All right, so everything from this point forward is going to be considered what we call permanent insurance. All right, so it's intended to be for the rest of your life or your whole life. There's some factors in there that can determine whether it actually will be. Variable universal life. Is there anybody familiar with variable universal life? So essentially, the variable piece is the important part here. Variable just means that it has some sort of investments inside the life insurance that are going to actually determine the long-term health or the long-term success of your policy. Most of the time that's going to be mutual funds, which means you get to sit down with your financial advisor, so in this case Charmin, and decide how are we going to allocate my premiums, which are the money you're paying into the policy, into these mutual funds to help keep the policy healthy. This was super, super popular back in the 90s. Anybody guess why they were super popular back in the 90s? The market was just a runaway train. Everything was great in the 90s. You couldn't help but fall across a 20% return in the 90s. Any stock you bought was a great stock. I'm not going to say that she doesn't have the hardest job in the world, but I think it was a lot easier in the 90s to be picking stocks than it is these days. And that was all very, very good, but does everyone remember what happened in 2001? Tech bubble. Yeah. Burst. And a lot of people had bought these policies and had their money in those mutual funds and in those investments, and then all of a sudden they went down. A lot of these policies are struggling now, or at the point where they might potentially not be there when you need them the most, which is later in life. Okay? And I'm going to talk a little more about why that's one of the reasons we do reviews. So let me jump ahead. These two are kind of together, okay? The G here stands for guaranteed. In this case, you have guaranteed variable, and this is guaranteed universal life. So really they have some of the same features. How many people like seeing this word?
Yes.
Most people do. Kind of as a response to what happened in 2001 and the pressures on the market and the down market, this came into vogue, so to speak. So this was really the most popular product of the 2000s. This became what everybody wanted to hear. Now, these products were actually first sort of introduced and invented in the mid-90s. Now, anybody want to guess why we were buying more of this and less of these? Price. The variables were cheaper. Yeah. The guaranteed you had to pay more for because you had more protection. And people, of course, are always very price sensitive, so I'm never going to get away from that. But that was the reason that when these first came out, nobody really wanted them. And then all of a sudden the tech bubble happens. Everyone wants to hear the word guaranteed, and all of a sudden you can't get rid of these fast enough. So really what you have with a guaranteed UL, and again we're talking permanent insurance, is lifetime term. So your premium is going to be the same, your death benefit is going to be the same, regardless of what interest rates do, regardless of what the market does. You're not going to have to worry about this particular type of contract. Yes, ma'am.
In my lifetime, I don't see you have whole life on it.
Yeah,
Where is it?
I can give you that. It's going to fit right here above this. And the reason I don't have it is because we don't necessarily sell it,
Right.
but it's going to be in that same category.
Why
Now,
you don't sell?
well, I'll tell you why. And actually, I should move this over here because this is more like this. To be a whole life company is not a very easy thing
Why?
because you have to be a mutual company. So if you're a policy holder of a whole life policy, then you actually are almost an owner in that company. So you buy your policy, and now you are part of a big pool of people that at the end of each year, that whole life company, and I'll give you probably Northwestern Mutual is the most well-known. At the end of that year, they say, okay, what was our mortality experience, which means did we hit our numbers, did more people pass away than we expected, and then what was our investment experience? And they decided you get a dividend back. So you have to build up that pool of people for it to really be successful. And most of those companies were started 100 years ago, and they experienced very, very good markets, I'll say, and they've really gotten popularity in the 70s when it really became super popular. Yes, ma'am.
What about the paid up policy?
Yeah.
Now, when my children was little, I took off policies and then they've been paid up like, say 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of those truly are paid up. Now, I still think it's worth reviewing because I think there's a lot of terminology in my world that can be misused. A lot of, especially like whole life contracts. So what they have is what's called a vanishing premium. So you pay your premium, and as long as everything works as planned, so as long as that dividend, let's say for a whole life contract, or in the case of like a UL, like this, as long as you get the return you're supposed to get over a long period of time, everything will be fine. But if you don't get what you're expecting, or they have to change the dividend on you, which they contractually can do, there eventually might be some risk there. There might be a chance of the policy lapsing. And that's where the policy review process, where you sit down and actually have that insurance company send you what's called an in-force illustration. And it'll show you projecting out in the future how that policy should perform based on past history. So from when the day that policy was taken out, they're going to calculate all that up to today, and then they're going to show you into the future based on assumptions, because you have to use it based on assumptions if everything is truly going to be okay. But a lot of them are truly paid up and you don't have anything to worry about. But for me, I'd rather go through the review process and make sure there's nothing to worry about. I see a lot of those contracts. The other reason,
I was going to say, and that's a free service that your insurance company provides to you. In your green folder, there is a letter that's already kind of pre-made that I can send into an insurance company if I need to review your policy. And it takes maybe 30 days tops for the insurance company to bring or to send back the report to me. But it will tell me if your policy will lapse and at what age it will lapse. So it's really a good review tool for us to sit down and do that. So I can do that free of charge for you.
but to finish the part about the whole life companies, they've been around for a long, long time. I don't know if you'll ever see another whole life company just pop up and come into existence. And they are great companies. I mean, I compete against them, so I know very, very well. Now, one of the reasons you do reviews also, and I was going to talk more about this in the policy review, but we'll jump into it, is some of the things that have changed in life insurance over time that might be a better fit for you now. I have this conversation with a lot of clients, and they have old policies, and you say, well, why did you originally buy the policy? Well, the kids were young. They were in my situation. We had the mortgage payment. We were both working. Great. So we took the policy out to protect everybody. Okay. Fast forward 20 years, and now we're talking. Why do you feel like you have the policy today? And they will look at me and go, I have no idea. They debit my account every month. I've actually thought about cashing it in from time to time. And, you know, honestly, that's a great question, but I don't have an answer for it. And that's another reason to go through the review process is because insurance can be repurposed. Insurance can be upgraded. There's features that have come along that are better and I think more applicable to client situations today than maybe the current policy that they have. The other thing about it too is mortality people are living longer. So a lot of the policies that were written in the 70s and 80s are written on mortality tables from 1952. For whatever reason, they expect people to live past 95 in 1952. So those policies actually stop at 95. The policies you write today actually go all the way out to age 126. You're not going to outlive it. So the other reason, and the reason I really feel like we should do it, not only is to make sure the policy is healthy, but to make sure that your changes in your life and your needs and what your goals are haven't changed to the point where we can find a better fit for you. And that means maybe same cash value you currently have inside your contract could get you more death benefit. We do things now where you can actually access a death benefit to help pay for your long-term care. So you have a policy that would now have two benefits. It would be, first of all, to help pay for your care, and then that's fine. We're going to give you a prize for that. You actually might have there's policies out there now where you can access it for your care first, and then if you don't use it all for your care, then it becomes a legacy for your kids or your grandkids. It doesn't have to just be a death benefit. And that, honestly, in my business has been one of the biggest differentiators in the last 6 or 7 years is everything else I do is for somebody else. It's for spouse, it's for the kids, it's for the grandkids, which is all well and good. But these riders that have come along now that would allow you as the client to be able to actually use that benefit for yourself first if you needed it, and then secondarily be a legacy for your kids or your grandkids has been a huge difference maker. So those are the types of things that have come out that potentially could be a bigger benefit to you than what you currently have today. So like Sharman was saying, it's such an easy process to sit down, discuss what you have, discuss what your needs are now, and then go through and look at the old policy just to make sure there's not something else out there that would be a better fit, and also to make sure what you have is going to be there when you need it, and when your kids or your grandkids need it. So does it make sense? The only other thing I've listed up here is this SGUL, which stands for second to die. Basically, that's a husband and a wife or two people on one policy. We use that a lot in the estate planning space because if you're going to allow us to use two people's lives to write the insurance on, we're going to give you a better deal. That's the only reason. So if we can count on two people, then we have a better situation there to be able to write the insurance. So any questions on the types of insurance and then that kind of review process? I mean, we really hit what it was, which is come in and have the conversation. And that's really my goal, honestly, at this point, is for you to go sit down with Sharman and talk about it. Everybody good? All right, we got one last thing, and I see everybody's getting to the end of their meal, so we're right on time.
John, can you speak on one other thing? I have some people to ask, I have a whole life policy. I bought it because it's going to accumulate cash on the inside of it,
Yeah.
and I'm going to use that in retirement. A lot of people think that with the whole life and the variable life.
Right.
But what I found is that cash doesn't build fast enough to use it as a retirement tool.
Yeah.
So, I usually say let's invest in a permanent policy and invest the difference.
Right.
But can you speak on that just a little?
Yeah, my take on cash value inside of a life insurance policy, it's really meant more for flexibility. I mean, unless you design it specifically, and these are very, very unique situations, to help pay for retirement, it's probably not going to be for that. What I've seen in my years in this business, and I know I look young, but I've actually been in this business for 7 years, so, is insurance policies get oversold as far as what they can do. They get oversold. You have somebody there that wants to sell you this policy, and that's an insurance agent, and they want to tell you can do everything in the world. You need a roof on the house, go to the insurance policy. Kids go to college, go to the insurance policy. Retirement, go to the insurance policy. I'm here to tell you, and I'm in the business, that's not going to happen. It's not an and proposition, it's an either-or proposition. So if you go in there for the cash value, you're either going to use that cash value as a way to help benefit you, or you're going to use the death benefit. But once you start harvesting out cash value, eventually you're going to kill the policy. So for me, what that does is it gives you flexibility. It gives you another way to use the policy, which is nice because you might have to do that. But I don't think it's ever going to be a huge piece of your retirement plan from a cash value standpoint. Where I see it being most flexible is going into that review process and saying, you know what, there is something better out there, and now the cash value is what you move over to the new policy to jumpstart it. You're not starting from scratch. Does that answer the question?
Mm-hmm, it does.
Perfect. All right, quick 5 minutes because I said I want to be creative for you. Everybody familiar with an IRA? Individual retirement account? It's probably the biggest retirement asset out there now. Now, prior to IRAs, we actually had pensions. And some people in this room might actually have pensions. There's not many pensions left in these days. So a lot of people who do have pensions and Social Security are going to be able to generate their income for the rest of their lives off of those assets. And then the IRA now becomes something extra. And what I've learned from IRAs and reading about IRAs and then doing some planning with Debra Jones is that IRAs are meant for in your case, IRAs are meant for the power of tax deferral. Okay, so what happens at 70 and a half with an IRA?
You have to withdraw.
All right, you gotta start taking your R&D, is what it's called, required minimum distribution. All right, so even if you don't need it, the government's gonna tell you gotta start taking it. The reason they want you to start taking it is because they want their taxes. They want you to start paying your taxes. Okay, so most clients I've met have what we call plan by default with their IRA. And the goal here is to kind of come up with a better strategy on how to distribute your IRA and to use your IRA. So here's the plan by default typically. All right, we're going to assume husband and wife. Most people, or all people really, are going to have to go from one to the other. You know, it's going to go between spouses, no problem. So that's not what we're looking at here. That's not necessarily the opportunity. But most people, once it goes from, say, the husband to the wife, upon the husband's death, that's where we have our opportunity. When the second person actually passes away, all right, so I'm going to draw a line here. By default, most people let it go straight to their kids. Okay? Now, what statistics show us is that, and you guys can tell me you're surprised here. I don't think many people are surprised. 92% of IRAs that are passed to a non-spouse dependent are decedent. So you're talking your kids. 92% are completely liquidated in the first 19 months.
I believe that. I believe it.
So it goes to your kids, and they take it and they dump it out. Now, why do they want you to start taking your R&D in the first place? Do you remember?
Okay.
All right. So what happens is they dump all that money out because they want to have that lump sum. And guess who becomes the biggest beneficiary of your IRA? The IRS. Okay? Now, you can do what's called a stretch IRA. Charmin can help you out with that. And that means that you can ask your kids or educate your kids that if you will take my RMD on your life, so they can actually start taking it at their age, then this money will last you much longer and you actually get a lot more out of the IRA. And that is always a good thing and something I guarantee you she's more than willing to have that conversation with your kids. Now, so here's your kids. So let's just imagine that the kids are 50 years old. And I have to use kids because I can lay it all out for you, Tommy, Jimmy, Johnny. But let's just say kids are 50. It goes to them. Once we go below this line, you get one opportunity to reset RMD. So if you're already taking your RMD and the IRA passes down to your kids, they reset the RMD to their age, and then it goes on until they pass away or that IRA is completely emptied out. Okay? Does that make sense? So here's the opportunity. What if we didn't pass it directly to the kids? So this is the plan by design. Plan by default is husband to wife, wife to husband, and then upon the second death it goes to the kids. Kids either dump it out, which is more likely to happen if you don't do the education piece. But what if we skipped a generation
To the grandkids.
and went to the grandkids? Okay? Let's just say the grandkids are 25. They get that same privilege of resetting RMD age. Now we don't get to reset it at 50, we get to reset it down to age 25, and they are actually going to take an income stream on their lives as long as they live.
Are they taxed?
They still get taxed.
What
And
do they
that-
take out?
But think about the RMD on a 70-and-a-half-year-old, how much they have to take out to satisfy an RMD versus the RMD on a 25-year-old. That's going to help them make, mortgage payment one month. That's going to help them have a little bit of an easier life. And in my mind, what it does is it replaces the pensions that grandkids aren't ever going to get a chance to have. Unless you're a postal worker or a teacher or a government employee, you're probably never going to have a pension, which means you're never going to have a guaranteed dollar of retirement. Now, there are vehicles. I'm not here to sell annuities, so Charmin will tell you that. But they're not going to they're not going to have a guaranteed dollar of retirement ever until they make that decision to go that route. And this ends up becoming a guaranteed pension for them, essentially. Now, if it's a large enough IRA, there are actually estate planning tools out there that can make a stretch IRA irrevocable. And that, to me, is something that is worth discussing once you've gone through the initial conversation. But let me go through one more step, because this is where it gets creative. We have somewhat disinherited the kids at this point, which some people are really okay with. They're going to get enough anyway. But let's just say that RMD that the parent is supposed to take, and not that maybe, and again, they don't have a plan for it. There's a pension, there's Social Security. We're taking this RMD and we're kind of usually taking it and dumping it right back into the same taxable account. So here's what we do on the insurance side. We take the RMD and we buy a life insurance policy with it. Okay? And what that does is it leverages that money immediately. It also makes it tax-free, because that's one of the nicest things about life insurance. It's tax-free. Passes tax-free. So now upon the second death, this pays out to the kids, and they wanted a lump sum anyway, right? They were to get the IRA and dump it out anyway. Well, they get their lump sum. That's what this does for them. And you stretch the IRA down to the grandkids to become a lifetime income for them based on their age. And a lot of times there's a calculator that Charmin has on Edward Jones' system. What you see is even if your kids took their RMD, if they did the stretch and they actually paid attention and listened, they're going to get half of what the grandkids would get simply by time value. By stretching that out even longer and letting the grandkids be the one that take that income stream, it's actually going to almost double the amount that will come out of an IRA over the life, as opposed to having it go directly to your kids. And ultimately what it does is it enhances the entire estate, and it gives a purpose to the RMD. So that's one of the things I like to walk through, because again, that's the type of planning that can be done. That's the creativity you can get into. And ultimately, even if you cut out this piece, by the way, you can still do that. That's just something that can be good planning. And I know that, working with Charmin, I have the last couple of years, and with Debra, there's so much more you can do, but the first step is having the conversation.
What's the age on the grandchild situation? Like how low?
How young?
How young?
If you already have very young grandchildren, then I suggest having some safety nets around it. That's something I know Debra can help you out with, because you don't want to be giving these types of assets to a minor. That's not going to be good. I could probably have Debra speak for a long time about that. You don't want to be giving it to minors. So there's accounts that can be set up to hold it, to alleviate that. I mean, of course, everybody's going to put this in place and then plan on being around to see their grandkids grow up. And hopefully that's the way it works out. But you need to have some plans in place to make sure that if they happen to pass quicker than you expected, it will take care of it. Yeah, Debra, help me out.
And while when you said that, that was one of the things that I did want to say, is that if you don't do anything else, if you know anybody who has their insurance policy payable to each other and then to their children, please ask them what they think will happen to that insurance if something happens to them before their children become of age. What happens is the money is paid to the clerk of court in that scenario where both parents died. Their life insurance policy would be paid into the clerk of court, who would keep it until their 18th birthday, and then on their 18th birthday, upon a showing of their picture ID, would write them a check. And there is not anything that you can do about that if you don't plan. My son, real life story, my son actually had a friend who, when he graduated from high school, he got a check for $250,000 on his 18th birthday. He saw him not too long ago. They were 25, and he has none of it.
Yeah. So they say that's the other bad part about using an 18-year-old $250,000. I know what I would have done with it at 18. It wouldn't have lasted much longer than that young man said.
So we're talking here in this scenario, they're going to get an RMD that has a structure. So it's going to be minimum payments coming out of the IRA. If they're under 18, they can go into a custodial account. They can go into an account that's set up for them, but they won't have to take that money all at one time. And then Debra, she could come in, structure a trust that could have verbiage in it, right, Debra, to say they get so much at 25, so much at 30, so much at 40, and then that way you can plan how all this money gets dispersed. Yeah, but the idea is creating some generational wealth so that we can build upon this and, just help our community just, kind of get all this wealth in here.
This talks a little bit more about the types of insurance and then some of the life events that cause you to want to maybe reevaluate or even purchase insurance for the first time. And then this one actually talks a little more about what I'm kind of drawing out here crudely. It's not bad looking actually, but crudely here on the board. It kind of walks through a little flow chart of sort of how that would work, and then it has a little story that goes with it. So With that, I'm going to hand it back to Charmin so she can close us out for a little Q&A. But thank you guys for your attention. I really appreciate it, okay?
Great, you guys are good. Thank you so much, Charmin. I didn't give away all of my prizes. Yeah. But was dinner good? Everybody like dinner? Great, great. I wonder if dessert's coming. Did we have dessert on the menu too? So they should come. Okay. I understand if you have to take that to go. But yeah, let's go back to what Debra said. I'm going to give these prizes away. Can anybody name at least 2 or 3 legal documents that Debra mentioned in her presentation that we need to put in place? Living will. Okay. Do you golf? No? Living will. You name one. Okay. What's another one? Durable power of attorney. Okay. Healthcare power of attorney. Do you golf? Anybody golf? We golf. And just that she gave a good answer. That's yours too. Okay.
Short-term, long-term guardian.
Short-term, long-term guardians. There you go, Larry. There we go. Give you a sleeve of golf balls. There you go. But this is a really important topic. I know I make light of it, but really we got to get in here and do a review of what you've got, what your legal documents are, and kind of get your wishes met. So I'm really glad Debra came tonight. Let's think of some other things we can talk about. What about types of life insurance? We talked about how younger people need term while they have a lot of debt and they have small children. What is the type of insurance as you get older that you need in place? Whole life. Whole life, or now whole life is a little bit more expensive than the other type we talked about.
Is it better?
Okay, what's that word that everybody likes to hear? Starts with a G. That's right. Guaranteed universal life. And remember, that's a little bit cheaper than whole life, but it's going to last your whole life, and it's going to be guaranteed. So.
There is some bells and whistles at product.
Bells and whistles? Okay, what type?
People in the room need to understand, yes, it's guaranteed, but you miss one bank draft, the bill's off.
And the deal's out. Well, there's some no-lapse protections in there, right?
Most of them do have some sort of 30-day window, but to his point, we're probably not going to, we'll send you a note, but if you don't have the right mailing address or you're not getting the mail for some reason, that there's a very short window of time for the policy to stay in force, which is another advantage to having some cash value in there, because if you have cash value, they will take the cost, the ongoing cost for the policy out of the cash value first, as opposed to going straight into a lapse situation. So absolutely, you gotta have some safety nets there. I mean, I know that the policies we do through Jones, if they're not monthly drafts, we try to make sure that the financial advisor is the one that's kind of in charge of helping make sure they make that payment.
Right, and I get actual premium delinquent notices. So I can call clients and let them know, hey, we haven't gotten that payment. We need to get that in. So that's part of the deal. When you work with a team such as me, John, and Debra, you will get the best as far as financial advice and help with making sure we stay on track. Because we're going to do reviews. We're going to make sure we call you. And we're going to make sure we're there with you the whole entire way. Yeah. Any other questions from anybody?
Will you pay the premium for it?
Oh, now listen, we can talk about that. If you have dividend-paying stocks, tax-free bonds, I can accumulate that for you in an account. And yes, sir, we can pay your premiums for you. Yeah, and he talked about RMDs. RMDs, I see a lot of times people will have to take that money out at 70.5, but they don't use it. They've got either pensions coming in, Social Security, or other income they're living off of, and the RMD is just extra. So a lot of times you can set up a life insurance policy if you want to give that to your family members and pay that life insurance premium with that RMD that you're not using.
An annual premium?
The annual premium. You can do that, or you can do the monthly premium.
And I did include it, but church and charity items fall on that too. It doesn't just have to be kids and grandkids. There's other things.
Thank you for saying that.
PCA and whatever it is that is near and dear to your heart. You can take care
Absolutely.
To your dog and cat.
Some people do that and have a
Unfortunately,
They do. Yes, ma'am. You can do that. They create it, and they're willing to trust. All right, any other questions? Thank you, everybody, for your time. We'll just wait for the dessert. And if something comes up,
just let me know.
Thank you.
Okay? And we will be calling you for just a checkup to review and see if you'd like to come in and sit down and review your policies or anything else. Thank you.
Just gonna let you all know, for your convenience, just in case you're in a hurry, I was gonna bring out to-go bags. So your dessert is gonna be in a to-go container. More than welcome to have it here, but a lot of times people are ready to go, so we just go ahead and put it in to-go box.
Didn't hear lots of talk an hour. Just
And is anybody a Carolina Duke fan? It's at 9, so I got you out before 9. Okay. Yes. Oh, you glad I said it? I want to make sure. Oh, sure. Oh, that's
Don't tell me that you know. She said, no, I got this. She's going through the thing, but she's going to be all right. She's going to take it to New York.
She asked about it, and she said she might, and
So I don't trust her. But you and I could, we have to read that. I wondered about that. Yeah. Because this is so really what I need to say is her
That's all right.
I would have gotten out of your way, but I couldn't move around.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And that's a good question, but in my case, I'm not really so, and she doesn't have children. And a lot of people you're right. Okay. Okay, that's what I need. That's what I yeah, that was really really good information. That's not enough, but for me, over so see, you hit on something. change, and I love her. We don't want to be just like get things can change in life. That's all we're saying. And you guys. Exactly. Exactly. Real fun. Okay.